Good afternoon. My name is Ryan Quijada. Today I'm going to be presenting my capstone project. It's going to be titled The Dynamics of Police Culture and How It Is Ever Changing, Learning to Grow as a Leader. So in this, I wanted to focus on how leaders can ultimately grow in the organization of law enforcement. I think law enforcement has always had a reputation of nitty gritty, black and white, authoritative, and other strict guidelines when being a leader or a supervisor. It is pretty rough around the edges in the business of law enforcement, right? It kind of has to be very structured. So with that, there's a dynamic on how to grow a team, how to develop a culture, how to reinforce good officer behavior, work resiliency, and also, of course, arguably the most important is communication or community relations, and the culture that comes with that. So with that, I wanted to seek and find out if some of the great traits and leadership styles that we've learned at this program of servant leadership is actually found in law enforcement, and how it's being applied, what the result looks like of leaders successfully and consistently employing these leadership styles into law enforcement, and just kind of seeing what happens next. So one of the first things I want to look at is, like I mentioned, is going to be officer resiliency. Being a police officer myself, I have found that depending on obviously like certain leaders and leadership that I might be under as a patrol level officer, their style of leadership, whether it's like a direct in command or authoritative kind of position, those tend to wear off over time, right? Being on the receiving end of a supervisor versus a leader is really how I separate the two, of authoritative, agenda-based, supervisory styles of leadership in the law enforcement agency versus the servant leadership, which is what we're looking at. So, that's one of the first things I want to look at. The second one was organizational culture as a whole. How does one's leadership basically lead by example, demonstrate what it's like to be caring, compassionate, kind, patient, vulnerable, transparent, all these great qualities of what a servant leader looks like, and how does that basically enable a law enforcement agency or organization to embellish in a better culture and a better community in their own little agency. Now, stepping out of the agency or the organization is where they work, who they work for, and the community that they are actively in every day, day in and day out. How does a servant leader influence growth in communities? How does a servant leader basically help merge these two based on good traits that are carried out from leader to the officers to the work that they do, and ultimately leaving a good impression on the community that they serve. So during my research, I found plenty of articles, a lot of them all very similar, but the first of which speaking in regards to officer resiliency, work ethic, and work behaviors. A lot of the findings basically said that an officer who is likely to experience a leader who is very fluid in how they work, how they basically have such an influential perspective on the job they're doing, being vulnerable with their team, basically allowing for safe spaces to communicate, how people are feeling, talk about current issues, talk about whatever needs to be discussed without feeling like you're going to get in trouble after a conversation, because that's a real thing. Officers who also experience, maybe you get some delegation or respect from the leader, other servant leader qualities such as being patient and having grace, because mistakes happen in every workplace and every organization. So the ones that felt like they were more accepted by their leader demonstrating servant leadership were basically found to enjoy going to work more. They have a better work resilience, so they'll push through the difficult challenges, push through those difficult conversations a lot easier. They're more eager to actually have these conversations, more eager to be more open, more vulnerable with these topics that they might be, encountering on a day-to-day. And it's not just from servant leader to officer, it's also that is what we're going to talk about later, and how it works itself into the community as well. So overall, very positive findings, very positive, overall, just by having a servant leader, a leader who forgets about the agenda, forgets about the statistics, forgets about some of this stuff just a little bit more than the other one, right? And they focus more on the individual. They focus on more service. They focus on prioritizing them, their well-being, and how they are doing and how they are performing and how it all works and clicks together as a team. That has been found to be very, very vulnerable or valuable in this crazy organization of law enforcement. And speaking of personal experience, I have had both servant leaders and I have had authoritative leaders in this profession, and I can say as well, everything I found on those readings about how it is nothing but positive, and it is just an investment into a greater good. It's very true. Now moving into the second topic, which would be work organizational culture and improving that, and seeing how a servant leader actually truly impacts it. Well, once again, I think it's going to be hard to find anything negative about servant leadership, except for maybe a little bit more effort than just looking at like a checkbox, checkbox leader, right? We all know what that kind of looks like, the agenda-based kind of guy, right? It takes more effort than that, but it's important. But other than that, I didn't find any readings on that. I'm just speaking. But the findings I did see and I did read about in regards to the culture is, once again, service-based attitude, the positive workmanship, the support. It's all going to go from the leader into the officer, and the findings are that it has now established a better work organization. Whereas in the past, in a more traditional law enforcement agency, the culture is very hardened. The culture is very salty. It's like everyone wants to be better than everybody else, but on the flip side in this, when service is demonstrated and service is basically being led by example by these leaders, officers tend to follow suit. Officers then take that and they create a better community, better culture within their law enforcement agency, which inevitably makes it a healthier environment to be in. It reinforces the work resiliency that we spoke about earlier. It creates an environment that people enjoy going to work, okay? I know that it's tricky because a lot of cops have like 25 years on, 20 years on, 15 years on, and one of the things I found in my research is that some hardened, seasoned cops did have a hard time kind of switching to this service attitude, switching their culture that they've known for however many years they've worked there. They've known it for as long as they've been a cop. And so it is difficult for them to kind of accept this new change. So accepting the change, accepting the switch, and that the new effort needed going into this community and this culture within the law enforcement agency was one of the findings I did see that were a bit challenging for some officers. But once again, it's another good segue into the next topic. it's now the community, right? It starts with leader to officer, officer to the agency, and now the work that they all do, the culture that they're all embedded in, now it's poured into the community. And once again, positive stuff. Um, it is very dynamic depending on where you're at and what kind of city you're in, how big your agency is. There's a lot of things that go into it, but the findings basically displayed that or demonstrated the fact that these positive traits and characteristics, it's like a big old train. It doesn't slow down for nothing. It carried through more positive findings, right? By being an officer, a patrol level officer, doing the footwork, engaging with the community, taking reports, supporting the victims, arresting the suspects of these big crimes, and doing it with a service-based attitude, right? A service-based attitude, and this was described as something like, it takes, that's a lot of work out of the question, right? That thought process of, this is a lot of work, right? I'm gonna be a slouch about it now. Or we're not gonna take this report because it's just not there yet. But realistically, you could still take a report and support these community members. The service-based attitude switches that perspective into I care about you. What if this was my family? Let me serve you. I'm here to do this job. We need to do this, and I need to show you that me in this position of authority is here for you. I'm here to support you. It allows the officers allowed some of the community members to communicate more freely, be more vulnerable with them, be more of a person to them. Because sometimes these officers, they show up, they're monotone, they come off as a robot, and it's intimidating. And with that, even taking a victim statement, they're reluctant to maybe share the whole truth. But by eliminating that, and by switching the perspective of, I'm here to help you, like we are here to serve you, what do you need? And whatever work comes after that is forgotten about, and it's just for the individual who needs our help. That has changed. It has grown positively with obviously community relationships, communication, and overall interactions. I saw this in several different readings I found. The one big change that was a little bit difficult in this is when a police department is putting effort into making these changes and making that community push, but based on politics, there was one reading after 2020, because as we know, 2020 was quite the event for law enforcement and the community, and the relationships that follow with that. So that was a hurdle, has been a hurdle. I think in my era of policing the last 2 years, it's been a little different. It's been on the downside. Whereas earlier, closer to 2020, a few more years ago, that was a struggle, right? Regardless of what kind of service was provided or could be provided, there's the stigma that had to be overcome. And I think that based on these years of this new service attitude that we're seeing, so many new police departments, are not new, but police departments take up this new, this new perspective of leadership. It's changed for the better. And in addition to that, I think this is on one of the other topics, but just to mention, promotions have been taken a little bit more seriously, right? It's not, who has how many arrests, who has worked here as long as, or who's worked here longer, who looks better in the uniform. It's not about that so much anymore. A lot of departments are now really jumping on who is a servant leader, who is demonstrating all these characteristics of patience, vulnerability, communication, accountability, humility was a big one. With that, it all affects the community, and it's all a positive, overall, generally positive, take on a lot of stuff, which I'm very pleased to find as many articles and journals and readings as I did. I really didn't know if I was going to find a lot, but there really is a lot, and they all speak about the same thing. You'll see my paper, it could read as a little repetitive, but that's what I found. That's what supported, my capstone and my thesis that I had, and I'm pleased to find that These things are all positive. These things are great. This is a great step for law enforcement and the communities moving forward. I know my agency is already moving forward towards that direction, and many others around me as well. So ultimately, it was a pleasure actually doing this capstone project, since it's so relatable for me, and it's very important to everybody else in the community too. So with that said, I hope you enjoy my paper, and thank you for listening.